Robbie Damelin lost her son. Shireen, her brother and grandmother. Ali sacrificed his brother. Marvat lost her grandfather. Dori lost his son. And Ronnie, 2 sons. In 1948, the State of Israel was declared in what was formerly Palestinian territory. Israel was to be a homeland for Jewish people from around the world. The state would also be a home to thousands of European Jews who were displaced by the Holocaust. One of the first acts of the new state was to establish its borders and to protect its citizens. In the process, hundreds of Palestinian villages considered hostile by the new state of Israel were attacked. Almost 1 million Palestinians fled to live in refugee camps in the West Bank, Gaza, and neighboring countries. Palestinians describe this as the Nakba, or Great Catastrophe. Since the Nakba, Israel and its Palestinian neighbors, now confined to the West Bank and Gaza, have been living in a perpetual state of war with each other. The Palestinians want their land back, and Israel wants to protect its state and citizens at all cost. Both sides have paid a heavy price for the conflict, often in blood.
The Palestinians and the Israelis made these wonderful candles. So we had
My name is Robbie Damelin, and I came to live in Israel in 1967. Actually, I came here to save the country in the Six-Day War.
Robbie immigrated to Israel from South Africa 40 years ago. In her time in Israel, she's seen conflict and lived through tragedy. Robbie is a grandmother now. After some very difficult times between her and her son Iran, they are now good friends. Israel is still in conflict with its neighbors. It is a conflict that has asked of Robbie the ultimate sacrifice. It has also taken her life on a path she never expected.
אני בסדר גמור. מה העניינים? מה לעשות? היא שולחת אותי, ואני משאלת, ואני לוקח את הטלפון. מה יש לך? אמא? תמר.
תשים את זה שם. Hello, darling.
When I came here, there was this extreme euphoria of the Six-Day War. I mean, Israelis, not like 3 weeks before the war, had thought that that was the end of Israel. And, you know, they were surrounded by such a huge amount of enemies, you know, with huge armies and the threatening of Nasser, that I think they couldn't actually believe what happened in the Six-Day War. And that it happened so quickly and that, you know, relatively speaking, without any damage. And this euphoria created this madness for building and for putting down a stake. And of course, today, when you look at all the results of all this madness are the settlements. And what a wrong decision that was, and how much more valuable it could have been if we had made peace then, or how many more lives would have been saved.
The conflict also took a personal toll on Robbie's life.
I got married, I think it was about 6 years after I came to Israel. And then I had 2 children, one after the other. I was married for 11 years. The last place we lived was on a moshav. And it didn't work out, and I got divorced. And then from then on, David and Iran and I were like this kind of triangle that lived together.
When my parents divorced, when I was about 10, we all moved to a very small apartment in Tel Aviv, and then we had to share everything, you know, clothes, and it was a very tough period over there. And yeah, we grew up together very, very close.
And it was a very liberal kind of a background, because I wasn't your conventional mother, you know, and I wanted my children to take responsibility for their lives and to be able to have dignity and to give dignity to people around them.
The days of joy were short-lived. In 1973, Israel was at war with its neighbors once again.
The situation was really very weird in 73. You know, there were the blackouts at night, and suddenly I started knitting balaclavas for the soldiers. I can't knit. I mean, it's pathetic. Any poor soldier that got my hats must have killed himself laughing. But there was very little that you could do except be there and look after your children and go to the shelter if needed. But there was, I think, for the first, again, a sense of fear, you know, that something, the outcome of the war was not sure, especially in the first days.
Robbie realized that she and her family could not be spared the horrors of war forever. Soon her own sons would have to take up their duty as soldiers and protectors of the State of Israel. Israelis have to do 3 years of national service, and they normally do it after finishing high school.
You know, there's a sense of being invincible also that I keep saying. It's like young soldiers. Why, the people who go to the army, why do they always call up very young men of 18? Because when you're 28 and 30, you're much wiser and you know that it's possible that you won't come back. But when you're 18, you think you're invincible. Sometimes I think if the generals had to actually go to war themselves, I think we'd have a lot less war. Sometimes I feel so guilty. No, why didn't I recognize the dangers for my own children? And I really believed when they were little that by the time they were 18 there would be peace. And I remember going to say goodbye to Iran when he got called up. And this terrible fear that started, you know, that just went on because Iran was in the army, and the difference in age between Iran and David was a year and a month. And I remember standing there at the place where they were inducted into the army and saying goodbye to Iran and seeing him get on the bus and not believing that he actually, you know, would be carrying a gun. This lovely kid, you know, who grew up in such a liberal-minded house, who was taught to be tolerant and not have any racial prejudices or religious prejudices. You can't believe that something will happen to your child, and your child also doesn't believe that something would happen to them.
Although Robbie had a very good relationship with both her sons, David was always the one she had most in common with. They were kindred spirits and shared a love for the arts. David also devoted his life to the peace process, a cause he shared with his mother. After his initial 3 years of military service, David studied to get his master's in the philosophy of teaching. But it was not the end of his military service. He still had to complete his reserve duties, normally a month a year. That often means doing duty in the occupied Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza. And with this, David had a serious issue.
He belonged to Peace Now, and it was a big conflict for him. And he said to me, look, I don't know what to do. Because if I don't go, what will happen to the students that I'm teaching who are going to be inducted into the army? What kind of an example is that? And if I don't go, what will happen to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And if I do go, then I will treat people with respect, and so will all my soldiers. And that's what I keep telling people all over the world who look at things just with black and white, you know, that there's so much gray in the middle, and that people have this tremendous conflict here. about what to do. You know, what's the right thing to do? You were brought up all your life knowing that you had to serve in the military.
David decided to report for duty and was sent with his platoon to the Valley of the Thieves checkpoint inside the West Bank. Their duty was to stop and check all Palestinian cars and pedestrians and to make sure they carried the right papers. This checkpoint has been in existence since the British occupation of the area after the First World War, and it served no purpose other than controlling traffic between the two Palestinian villages. But on March the 3rd, 2002, it would serve another purpose. The hills and thick bush surrounding the checkpoint gave excellent cover to a Palestinian sniper. He used this cover to get close to his target. It took careful aim, and in the first light of day, killed 10 people. David was one of them.
And at about 11 o'clock, there was a knock on the door in my office, and the army came to call me. And of course, they didn't have to say anything. And then they asked me, who do I want, you know, who should they tell? And I just couldn't even think of Iran's telephone number, you know. And there's a lot of blank stuff between then and coming home and Iran coming and hundreds and thousands of people just all around me and not knowing. I didn't know what was happening. But I do know that one of the first things that I said, and this is what people tell me, was that you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. There must have been something very deeply ingrained in what I felt. I don't know, you know, so many sad things of, I can't remember, I know I didn't want to go and see David because I didn't want to think of him like that. I just wanted to remember him driving off from down there and me waving and him saying goodbye. And think of the things of his vitality and being alive.
At the tender age of 28, David Damlin was dead. He died while serving his country. His family was now left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives.
But life has very strange paths which it takes you, where you never know why things happen, but actually, in the very long run, when you start to put it all together, you understand that almost everything you've done in your past has some meaning for the days that happen afterwards.
At the Valley of the Thieves checkpoint, inside the West Bank in Palestine, 10 Israelis lay dead, killed early in the morning of the 3rd of March 2002 by a Palestinian sniper. Another died in hospital. Mickey Schmidt worked for Channel 10 News as a camera operator at the time and was one of the first on the scene.
It was 11 or 12 bodies lying near the tent. A lot of blood. It was nothing exciting for me because in this period it was another ordinary day. You know, we have all this in the West Bank and inside Israel. It was a second intifada, and it's happened on a daily basis that somebody killed somebody, some bus exploded, some soldiers shot it.
One of those killed was David Damlin, a peace activist doing his reserve duty. His life cut short at the age of 28.
The army said it was a sniper, but as the hours go on, they start to tell the sniper was not Palestinian, probably one of the IRA or maybe former Soviet Union sniper, but they never want to say it was a Palestinian. All the time it said some professional they hired to do this job. And the day after, I know they find a rifle, which is was very old British rifle from World War II, I think. And the formal version was like a young Palestinian youngster just find the rifle and by mistake kill 11 Israeli soldiers. That's the official Israeli army point was.
But was David simply a military casualty, or could his death have been avoided?
The place itself, let's start with the name. The place itself is called Wadi Haramiyeh. Wadi Haramiyeh is the Valley of the Thieves. It's a place known historically as a place where convoys were ambushed. Talk about 100 years ago. And that's not a place to put an outpost. And the only reason that outpost was there in the first place is because there was a building. And the other reason is that it was used as a resting point for settlers that were ambushed. Or there was a settler that was ambushed, a woman settler that was ambushed 2 years before. And they used that point, and the settlers demanded that that point would be manned. And that's the only reason that there was a roadblock. It's not blocking any access point to Israel or anything like that. It's just a road between two settlements. The bush there was extensive. You can't find yourself. You can't find your arms or legs. And you send a soldier to stand just 80 meters from the outpost itself, and he stood, sadly to say, very unfortunately, just at the point where the sniper was, day after that. And the soldier said to him, "David, do you see me?" And he said, "I can't see you." He said, "From this point, I could kill all of you."
In a telephone conversation hours before he was shot, David told his mother about his reservations. It was to be their last conversation.
We had this really weird conversation, and he said, "It's like being a sitting duck here." And I was so stunned that he told me that, because he would never, make me worry about. I never knew what my kids were doing in the army.
The sniper arrived at dawn, hid behind a huge tree, had time to rest, to wait till the first rays of sun, and then just started shooting the soldiers at the barrier near the outpost.
Ilan Paz, a retired general who has offices in this building in Tel Aviv, was the general directly in charge of the checkpoint where David was killed.
During these years, we had several attacks on these checkpoints, and we lost several soldiers during these attacks.
We believe as responsible civilians that people should take responsibility for their actions. The responsibility is shared many ways. I think it is firstly shared between the officers there, the generals there that decided to put the outpost where it was, and gave in to the settlers who demanded that outpost to be manned. They could have found a better place to put that outpost.
The army, at least in Israel, I believe that not only in Israel, doesn't have any agenda. The government of Israel is the place to decide whether we will go to this agenda or other agenda.
To this day, nobody wants to take responsibility for what happens at checkpoints. The military passes the buck to the politicians, and they in turn blame the security situation. While the buck is being passed, ordinary people on both sides suffer the consequences.
And in the army, we cannot deal with issues, with political issues. We have our job, we have our duty, and we are doing it exactly without any connection to our personal views.
אנשים פה בני גיל 18 מקבלים כוח של באמת ענק בידיים. באמת, בראש דבר מה שקורה לתושבים זה בידיים שלנו בסופו של דבר.
I suppose it has nothing to do with military decisions. I think more it had to do with politics.
And then there was this incredible funeral. There were thousands and thousands of people there. I don't know where they came from. Students, who'd been in the student uprising with David, all my friends, his pupils, who he was teaching, I don't know, he had the most incredible effect on people around him.
Roby knew that she had to go through a grieving process and that she would have to continue living.
I know that there are all these wonderful books on bereavement which tell you how you should be feeling. But I don't feel the way that they tell me that I should feel necessarily, and certainly not with the time frame that they give. I only know one thing, is that this is the worst thing that I can imagine, and that my life is not the same as it was before, and the longing doesn't go away, but that you learn to live with it next to you.
And then there was this huge void, which luckily she found the forum to be a place where she could channel her energies.
The Parent Circle brings together family members on both sides of the conflict who have lost loved ones. They share their stories as they deal with their pain. This is one of the few places where Israelis and Palestinians can share their feelings, and for many, it has been a life-changing experience.
How many more?
Amongst the bereaved parents, I could really be who I was. You know, I needn't pretend to be anything. If I felt like laughing, I would laugh. If I wanted to get drunk, I would do that. If I wanted to come to the parent circle, and the night before I hadn't slept, they would know why, and they would understand, because they would have the biggest empathy. And I really discovered this. It took me a little time to understand the ease with which I could be with other bereaved parents. But I did recognize that the pain of the Palestinian mothers was the same pain as I had. And I went away from there, and then I started to flirt with the parent circle, you know, to come more and more. And then it became my life. It's taken over my life, really. That's when I first met Ali. I mean, I'd seen him, you know, around, but I didn't know who he was, really. But I discovered him in Italy, you know, when we went with the Pope and to the radio.
Ali was a young Palestinian who had lost his mother and brother to the conflict. In him, Robbie saw someone who would understand her pain and who could share her passion for reconciliation.
And at Sunday, we've been invited to be blessed by the Pope. At the same time, they wanted to interview us in the Vatican radio, something like that. And none of the Palestinian or the Israeli want to go because they want to be blessed by the Pope. Just me and Robbie decide that it's okay, we want to go to the interview. And we realized that I listened to her story in the radio station, and she listened to mine in the radio station. So everybody there started crying, including us. And for me, something took me from all of this history, from all of this suffering, and I was so much deep in the human being, inside me and inside that mother who just I met and I hear her story.
Ali and Robbie became good friends. They both shared the vision of a non-violent solution to the conflict. Together, they started sharing their story with international groups. They knew the only way to bring lasting peace was to do it from the ground up. They started to blaze a trail between the two nations where there had been none before.
And politically, our relation it seems impossible. And we are thirsty for it. We want to live side by side or together or whatever as two nations. But what Israel government is doing on the ground is the killing of this human relation between people.
But what would come out of this new friendship was something Ali could never have imagined.
My name is Ali Abu Awad. I'm from a town in Palestine called Beit Umar, around Hebron. I'm 35 years old. I'm part of the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum.
Ali met Robbie while attending a meeting of the Parent Circle. Robbie had lost his son to a Palestinian sniper at a checkpoint. They became good friends. It was through Ali's eyes that Robbie had a view into what it means to be a Palestinian in the West Bank today.
We are in Hebron now, Hebron city, and we are going down to the old city where is the settlers living and taking houses of Palestinian, because Hebron is the most economic city in Palestine. We had inside Hebron as a city 140,000 people here, 140,000 in Hebron, and they are controlled, their life is controlled by 700 settlers.
The Jewish settlement in Hebron started small when only a handful of families bought houses in the old city, deep inside the West Bank. Their numbers grew quickly. Abraham's tomb is in Hebron, and this is one of the most holy sites in Judaism. Some of the more conservative rabbis believe the Jews have a right to the city. God promised it to them. As the settlement grew, so did conflict with its Palestinian neighbors. The settlers started demanding protection from the Israeli government, who sent in the army. They started closing roads and established the sterile zone around the settlement. Today, the 700 settlers are protected by up to 4,000 soldiers at a time, surrounded by their 140,000 Palestinian neighbors.
So the most problematic place in the world, we're going there. So we will put the car here. No, in the front, it's better. I grew up as a refugee, and I have been born to a very political family. My mother used to be one of the most active leaders for PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, Fatah, in our area. And she was in the prison for several times. She spent around 5 years for her activities against the occupation. So I became involved in the first Intifada. That was my chance to do something for Palestine and to present the case of injustice against the Palestinian as a child. So I was throwing stones, doing different activities, because I just want the international community to pay attention.
Ali walks with Mervat, an old friend, down the streets of Hebron. He grew up here. It is not long before they're stopped by the Israeli police. They're asked who they are and what they are doing here.
שלום. אני חבר בפורום המשפחות השכולות, והם אנשים מדרום אפריקה עושים סרט על האמא ישראלית ועליי. אני איבדתי את האח שלי והיא איבדה את הבן שלה. איפה אתה? אני בכפר בית עומר. איפה? בית עומר. והיא? גם היא מהכפר, אבל האמא ישראלית מתל אביב. So you are not free, even to think you are not free, to behave. And this is Israel, the democratic country. This is the fiction that they use to hide the truth. You can note that some Palestinians just left their houses. This home, they left because they can't live here. And this is what the settler wants, just to push the Palestinian out from their houses.
This is the life Ali grew up with, and it has had a profound impact on him.
You know, as a child you grow up and the whole condition around you you cannot exist. You cannot exist as a child. You cannot, sometimes you can't dream because you feel that all of your daily life is damaged. So you cannot plan, you cannot have a dream. And if you have a dream, it will not be saved. It will not be true. Because somebody controlling you, somebody is controlling your feelings, somebody is planning for your reaction. I feel it's a plan has been put to put me and to put my people in this cycle of madness. When you lose your dream, when somebody controls your life, when you have a very bad daily condition around you, when you grow up as a refugee, somebody came from out and take your home, and you recognize him, and he occupy you after you run away also, and he didn't allow you even to live normally. This is the history of the conflict. Every detail in your mind and in your feeling has been affected. So I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a hero for resisting the occupation.
At a checkpoint, Ali is stopped. He will now have to present his papers and answer questions. He might not be allowed to pass and will be sent back. It is up to these Israeli soldiers to make that decision.
עובדת בארגון פורום המשפחות השכולות, אולי שמעתם עליו. מסביר להם מה זאת אומרת, ככה זה הצד הישראלי, זה הצד הפלסטיני.
But then one of them recognizes Ali. He's seen him before.
Wow. In the parent circle we do lectures in high school. We just realized that we've met in his school, talking about the reconciliation and non-violent. This is all what we want. We just want to meet normally. I don't want him to be here like this, because everybody here is suffering, you know. So we have to end this. It will not be ended by those women. It will not be ended by this anger. People should understand the right of the other side.
Change is a slow process, and for now, Ali remains the occupied and the soldiers the occupier. He will not pass today. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Robbie was informed that David's killer had been caught. His name is Taher, a young Palestinian man about the same age as David was.
I think it's 2.5 to 3 years. I'm terrible at times. They caught the sniper who killed David. Wow, that was like, you know, the army. Of course, the army comes to tell you this thing, and I suppose they thought they would arrive at my house and I would be delighted and, you know, revenge, 20 years in, 200 years in jail is not enough, I don't know.
It makes me feel complicated, mixed, because that sniper, he's a Palestinian. He is considered here as a hero for all of the Palestinians because he was resisting and, you know, either killing or not, he was resisting the occupation, so he's a hero. But on the other hand, Robbie Damlin, that friend is not enough to say Robbie's my friend. She's more than my friend. And that guy killed her son. Well, wait, her son was a soldier. Well, okay, even he's a soldier, he's the son of Robbie. That was not easy for me.
What's anger? I don't know. You know, I looked very hard at myself at who I was angry. And I think I was very angry with the situation more than with the person who killed David, because actually, he didn't kill David because he was David. If he'd known David, I say this all the years through, that if he'd known David, he couldn't have done that. But I was angry with the situation, I was angry with the occupation, I was angry with the fact that there was a roadblock there which shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Her life had moved on. David was buried and Robbie was involved in the activities of the parent circle. How would she deal with this new situation? What would be her next step in the path to reconciliation?
Then one day she came and she told me, I wrote a letter to the sniper and I want you to deliver it to the sniper family.
This for me is one of the most difficult letters I will ever have to write. My name is Robbie Damlin. I am the mother of David, who was killed by your son. I know he did not kill David because he was David. If he had known him, he could never have done such a thing. David was 28 years old. He was a student at Tel Aviv University doing his master's in the philosophy of education. David was part of the peace movement and did not want to serve in the occupied territories. He had a compassion for all people and understood the suffering of the Palestinians. He treated all around him with dignity. David was part of the movement of the officers who did not want to serve in the occupied territories. But nevertheless, for many reasons, he went to serve when he was called to the reserves. What makes our children do what they do? Do they not understand the pain they are causing? Your son, by now having to be in jail for many years, and mine, who I will never be able to hold and see again, or see him married, or have a grandchild from him. I cannot describe to you the pain I feel since his death, and the pain of his brother and girlfriend, and all who knew and loved him. After David was killed, I started to look for a way to prevent other families, both Israeli and Palestinian, from suffering this dreadful loss. I was looking for a way to stop the cycle of violence. Nothing for me is more sacred than human life. No revenge or hatred can ever bring my child back. After a year, I closed my office and joined the Parent Circle Families Forum. We are a group of Israeli and Palestinian families who have all lost an immediate family member in the conflict. We are looking for ways to create a dialogue with a long-term vision of reconciliation. After your son was captured, I spent many sleepless nights thinking about what to do. Should I ignore the whole thing, or will I be true to my integrity and to the work that I am doing and try to find a way for closure and reconciliation? This is not easy for anyone, and I'm just an ordinary person, not a saint. I have now come to the conclusion that I would like to try to find a way to reconcile. Maybe this is difficult for you to understand or believe, but I know that in my heart it is the only path that I can choose. For if what I say is what I mean, it is the only way. I understand that your son is considered a hero by many of the Palestinian people. He's considered to be a freedom fighter, fighting for justice and for an independent, viable Palestinian state. But I also feel that if he understood that taking the life of another is not the way, and that if he understood the consequences of his act, he could see that a non-violent solution is the only way for both nations to live together in peace. Our lives as two nations are so intertwined. Each of us will have to give up on our dreams for the future of the children, who are our responsibility. I give this letter to people I love and trust to deliver. They will tell you of the work we are doing and perhaps create in your hearts some hope for the future. I do not know what your reaction will be. It is a risk for me, but I believe that you will understand, as it comes from the most honest part of me. I hope that you will show the letter to your son, and that maybe in the future we can meet. Let us put an end to the killing and look for a way, through mutual understanding and empathy, to live a normal life free of violence.
I wish that I can drive straight. Maybe one day, who knows?
And I felt really good that I can be part of this, because I care about both of them. I care about Robbie and I care about the sniper.
In the West Bank, the search was on to find the sniper's family. Taher, the sniper, was in jail, awaiting trial for having killed 10 people at a checkpoint. One of them, David Damlin. When Taher was caught, Robbie, David's mother, wrote his family a letter. She then asked her friend Ali Abu Awad, a Palestinian peace activist, to find them and deliver the letter.
So I took the letter to the family. They were shocked. And they told me the story of Thaer, the sniper, that he grew up and he saw his uncle when he was 12 years old. The soldiers put his uncle to the ground and they shoot him in his head violently, very violently. His uncle was killed and he lost after these two uncles. And that was the cycle of revenge.
So he decided to go on a path of vengeance. Very simple. Here comes the cycle of violence. So he went out and he killed 10 people.
Robbie wanted answers and expected the family to write back to her.
I'm quite an impatient character. So I expected, you know, in the next mail I'll get a letter from the family and then we can proceed.
But it was not to be. Palestinians do things very differently to Israelis. They also have the occupation to contend with. They don't have the same freedom of movement that Robbie has. Robbie would have to be patient.
You know, we are under occupation. Even your personal decision is not personal, it's a political. And the case of feeling also maybe guilty, I don't know.
Robbie did not only want the family to see the letter. She needed for Taher to read it. But he was awaiting trial and only a lawyer could see him. Shireen, his lawyer and also a member of the parent circle, had access to him. She offered to deliver the letter.
As a lawyer, or part of my job is to visit the prisoners in prison. So I just visited him and I took the letter that Robbie wrote and I decided to read it to him. He told me that he didn't knew that about David. He saw him as a soldier in a checkpoint and he wasn't in administration with the peace people against the occupation and things like that. He was standing there in a checkpoint as a soldier. So for him, the checkpoint is a symbol of injustice. It reminds him of the bad things that happened in his family. Two uncles were killed, and one of his uncles now is missing. They don't know where he is, and all the bad things that he have to go through as a child. He saw all these things in that checkpoint and the soldiers who are standing on that checkpoint.
But when I heard that, it was a sense of understanding that there was a human being behind the person who did this. That his hurt brought him to the point where he was ready to kill. It isn't that I'm condoning that. Please don't think that I think that forgiving means giving up your right to justice, or that it's okay what the person did, or that they can do it again, or that you would forget. I'll never forget.
While they wait for an answer from Taher and his family, Robbie and Ali continue their quest to offer an alternative to conflict. In Jerusalem, they tell their story to a group of pilgrims from the United States. The pilgrims are moved. Some even decide to talk about a pain and suffering they've been hiding for a long time.
Cold up. He got older, and he was an Israeli soldier, so but he came back very, very sad. You lost your son. I was looking for a new opportunity to get a bridge to the fall.
For Robbie, her work with the parent circle is important, but she knows that her process of reconciliation is not complete yet. Often the ultimate reconciliation is not with the enemy, but with those closest to you. It can also be the hardest form of reconciliation.
Many cases of when people die in a family, when you lose a child, the person who is ignored, or the people who are ignored are the siblings. It took me a while to realize that I didn't include Iran in my life. I remember he came to me about a few days after David was killed. And he said, you know, don't worry, I'll take you to museums and to concerts now. And I know he doesn't really like to do that kind of thing. And I said, you don't have to take David's place. I love you for who you are. And you make me laugh. And you've given me a grandchild, which is the best present I ever got. But the deep down truth is that I didn't really mean what I said then. It took me a long time to come to truth and to peace with Iran, and to recognize that he's the most important person for me in the world now.
Today, Robbie and Iran have a relationship that is strengthened by the hardship and loss they endured together. But for Iran, as an Israeli man, there is a duty he can never escape. At home, his call-up papers are waiting for him. He has to do his month a year as a reserve soldier. His mother does not know this yet.
We're not suicide bombers. I don't think we go in the decision to kill ourselves. We're not kamikazes. We all have lives. We all have children. We all have families. I'm not even talking about, you know, 18-year-old kids. I'm talking about a 36-year-old man with 2 kids. I don't go in a conclusion to turn my children into orphans. I want to come back. I want to see them grow. But the thing is, you have to make a choice. And the choice is either you want to stay in this country and fight for it, or you just want to leave. And both choices are valid, but if you want to stay, you have to fight for this country.
Robbie has no control over the decisions her son makes. She can also do little about the next step in her process of reconciliation. It is now up to Taher, the Palestinian sniper.
Maybe he'll write me a letter, I don't know. You know, I don't know. I can't, there's nothing that I can predict. In all cases of restorative justice, you know, it's a two-sided coin. It's not only up to me. And so I have to wait, and then we'll see.